Hey everybody, welcome back to Engaging the Phenomenon. And today we have organized a panel here. We're going to be discussing a broad range of discussions, definitely highlighting the recent UAP or UFO hearing in Congress. We have Reed Summers from the Emergent podcast, of course, Ryan Robbins from Post Disclosure World, and Pavel from Psicoactivo. So, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here.
Great
Thank
to
you for
be here.
having us. Be here.
So, of course, we just had the recent UFO hearing in Congress, which we were talking about a little bit before. It's always incrementally progress overall to have more witnesses, especially with a professional or U.S. government intelligence background, going on the record about their firsthand experiences with UFOs, and while serving in their roles. Uh, so let's start with you, Pavel. What was there something about the hearing that stood out to you ultimately?
Yeah. I think a couple of things though. Let's start with Wiggins, Alexander Wiggins, who I think he was the only one on duty still, and the only one who has been at a hearing while still on duty. And it was really significant for me that he's a Navy guy, that he didn't get any pushback for coming forward. That was a really interesting data point that um, the people from the Air Force who come forward do get a lot of pushback, and we saw a contrast there between him and Dylan Borland, who has been messed with for a decade. He said that's a long time, and that was the first one. I absolutely loved having George Knapp there, commanding the conversation in many moments. But for me, the most compelling and interesting was Dylan by far. Um, and I know that people keep saying that the detractors mainly say that Grush is not really a whistleblower. I don't agree with that, obviously, but I think Dylan reinforced that concept with everything he said, and I think his testimony about that black triangle was very powerful. So that's the first initial reaction that I get. It was a really good back on track from the last one from November, which had a lot of issues, as you guys know. But I think this one was on par with the 2023 one, except for one thing, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, and speaking of the Navy, right? It's interesting that the three videos that originally came out, the two with the New York Times and the subsequent one that came out a few months later were from Navy pilots. So, that's another
Mhm.
correlation there of the Navy somehow,
Yes.
and of course Jay Stratton's involvement with the Navy. Uh, Ryan, what about you?
I thought the hearing was excellent. Um, when you see people of this caliber and credibility talk about their firsthand experiences with UAP, it's hard to brush it away. It's hard to ignore it. It's not proof, unfortunately, but it can help wake the American people up to what's going on, to the lies the government has been involved in. I really liked what George Knapp said. He says this a lot, and I think it's very powerful. He talks about how the U.S. government handled UAP internally in like the 70s and 60s before the Freedom of Information Act got instituted, which showed that they took this phenomena very, very seriously. And then, but publicly, they downplay it all the time. And that would be a major piece of evidence that there's a cover up, which is something I harp on a lot. And the reason I harp on there's so much evidence for a cover up is because a lot of skeptics they're going to say, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, which yes is true, but there's nothing extraordinary about a UFO cover up. And when they say there's no evidence, I always hit back and say, well, if there's a UFO cover up, there is mountains of evidence. You can't have a UFO cover up transpire for decades and not be a lot of evidence. And in my opinion, that George Knapp was contributing to that perspective because you look at those FOIA documents and they have American officials talking about the UFO object, not fictitious, real, and having capabilities that our technologies don't. They had no idea that the FOIA laws were going to be instituted. So they didn't know that their conversations about it were going to come to the surface. And I'd like to build on something Pavel said, or Pavel. Let me know, Pavel, Pavel. What's the correct pronunciation?
Either one, though, it doesn't matter.
Okay. But um, the 2021 ODNI UFO report, um, they took a jab at the Air Force. They're like, I don't remember the exact sentence, but they said like, oh, but there's a lot to be desired with getting information from the Air Force. So the Air Force, has been notorious for holding information back. And as Pavel said, or Pavel said, the Navy has been much more forthright. And if you want my opinion on why that is, it's because the Air Force probably has some of the most compelling data on the UFO issue and probably have the most sins, perhaps, of the cover up. I mean, allegedly they were involved in ground zero of the Roswell crash, so they want to protect their asses. And one of the things that Representative Eric Burleson harped on during a recent Twitter space, is that he thinks, and I tend to agree with this, a large reason for the cover up is because people in the intelligence community and in the military, Air Force, what have you, they don't want to go to jail. They don't want to be prosecuted. And Eric Burleson has suggested, and I agree with him, that we should have an amnesty plan where people can come forward. We'll give them a year. And if they come forward within a year, no charges. But if they come after that year, charges. I think that would probably force disclosure. Obviously, if someone committed murder, we have to hold them accountable. But if it's corruption and lying to Congress and lying to the public, I'm totally on board with amnesty, because I don't see another pathway to get disclosure from the U.S. government. They've dug too deep a hole, and human preservation is too entrenched a psychological reality for human beings. Nobody wants to go to jail. People are just gonna cover their asses. That's just the way people are. But yeah, I think that this was my second favorite hearing. The one with David Grush was my first, and I think this moved the ball down the field for sure, and gave the American public a little bit more insight into what's going on. And it's just hard to, it's really difficult to perceive it as all nonsense. I mean, these people have no reasons to lie. They have no reasons to LARP. They've lost their pensions, some of them. They're getting harassed. They're getting threatened. Like, there's nothing in it for them. It's not like they're getting some big contract some of the naysayers say, oh, you just want to become part of the, you want to become rich by becoming a UFO person. No, they're not becoming rich. They've lost their revenue. They've lost their livelihood. So let's keep the momentum going. And I'll just end it with James Fox recently said he hears there's more things to come, more big things to come. So I don't think this is the end. I think we'll get more hearings, and I think these hearings will continue to pressure the U.S. government to disclose the truth. And I think Mike Rounds recently said that the UAP Disclosure Act, he thinks it's going to pass through the Senate, and we need the UAP Disclosure Act. If we get that passed, that'll be really exciting. And I'll end it there.
And you, Reed?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, my expectations were set that this should be an increment in the incremental process of shifting how this issue is covered by elected government on a stage that faces the American public. So I think in terms of shifting the conversation on whistleblower intimidation and threats, the need for protections, I thought it was interesting that there was an overall framing of the importance of whistleblowers in maintaining elected democracies. I thought that was good, and that's another kind of backdoor into the issue, because there's other issues that have whistleblowers who are also coming forward. And so, yes, I loved the witnesses. I loved what they brought to the stands. I was impressed by their courage, especially in the case of Dylan Borland. That is no small task to come forward on record like that. As I saw it, this was Congress once again kind of banging their heads on the secrecy apparatus, expressing their frustration, their inability to penetrate the depth of this cover up and putting that on display for the American public to witness and kind of testing the waters with the public. Is there appetite? Is there desire? Is there curiosity? Is there a need to know? I think there is. It has to be kind of awoken in people. I'm not sure the broad public or the mainstream will come around to this opting in on their own. They may need something to prompt that opting in. So I think this is the exact thing we need. Um, as I look at it overall, as I stand back, take the bigger picture view, I mean, I think Congress is revealing the limits of human oversight on what is, in all likelihood, a non-human presence. And that is deeply concerning. And I think framed in that way, that does wake up not only the American population, but the global community to see this as an issue that is owned by the human species as a whole. It should not be owned by any one national security state or the defense industry of one country or one region. So I think it's a positive step. There were some frustrations I had, especially with congressmen and congresswomen kind of seeming to wander into the issue via their 5 minute segment, if not wander into the room or wander out of it quite literally. They just seem to kind of like, oh, this is interesting. I think I'll pop some newbie questions on at a very serious forum, and that's frustrating. I think they need to be more well informed before querying these witnesses. I'll also just end by I also took note of the Navy Air Force kind of differentiation in terms of the process for whistleblowers. I'm not surprised. The Navy has been more open since the beginning. I do have a curiosity as to whether the UAP via USO parts of the phenomenon has a part to play, and that the Navy is witnessing underwater craft of demonstrably physical characteristics causing a significant potential threat to their operations. I'm also curious if the Air Force has had more success in recovering crashed vehicles and engaging in reverse engineering operations and the weaponization of whatever technologies have been gained. So it's just interesting to see that kind of bubble up to the surface via the two very different experiences um, Chief Wiggins and Dylan Borland had.
Yeah, and the U.S. Navy has been around for a very long time and probably very much have been experiencing UAP from their inception. Although the Air Force basically mandated as a specialized branch subsequent to Roswell with
Hmm.
the CIA.
Hmm.
So from their inception, they probably had a mission statement that they have to deal with it a certain way, where the Navy was probably already dealing with it in their own way. Although, the Navy naval labs and stuff, there's lots of speculation and UFO research that they've been working on this technology, and a lot of the people that have been working on a lot of high tech stuff do come out of the Navy, and even uh, Dr. Stephen Greer had a whistleblower, Richard Foch, who was a high level Navy scientist and claimed that he was in a place called the Vault. And in this vault, there was all types of research pertaining to anti-gravitics and um, I believe what we can consider directed energy weapons at that time. Uh, but yeah, I think the hearing it was diverse. It seemed like they are definitely trying to pace the conversation based on, like, with David Grush, it was just like a Hail Mary kind of, right. He's going all in. He's talking about really intense subjects, right? And maybe it did get a lot of headlines, but um, I don't know how that resonated with the public as a whole. Where this conversation seemed more relatable in the sense that you're dealing with individuals who are clearly highly trained, having interactions with the UFO phenomenon, and so I thought that it was a great conversation altogether. Um, but what do you what do you see as maybe a pitfall or downfall, or where they could have improved on the hearing? And I know, Pavel, you have some insight into that.
Yeah, that video they showed, that Burleson showed on Yemen from 2012. Um, when I initially saw it, I was like, "That's interesting," and the aftermath of it was what worried me because Burleson then appeared saying that there is no provenance to the video, that it was what they call a dead drop. And for me, that's a major issue because we're in this day and age, and the AI age specifically, and with all the tools that we have to edit and all that, CGI and all that, uh, not having provenance of a video of a UFO is one of the first problems that need to be solved before presenting it at a hearing, which is, and they say that Corbell said that he vetted it. I just wonder what that vetting process was like, because they keep saying that it's like anonymous. I know, based on some of the investigations that I've been doing, some of the drops that I've been doing, that Burleson had contact with a civilian person who goes by the name of Michael anonymously, who was going into skiffs, and he had a type of technology he developed very similar to the dog whistle. And he claimed that based on this technology that he used, he was able to attract these things, and he took a lot of close up pictures and videos. And this was later confirmed by Burleson himself at a Twitter space, where he said that these videos, he showed them to people from the military, and they were very surprised that this guy could take such close up pictures and videos of triangular objects. And I heard before the hearing that there was something that they were going to show that was really impressive, and I thought that was it, but no,
Hmm.
it wasn't it. And I thought it was a really missed opportunity for Burleson because he had access to this video, and Borland had this account of this black triangle that he saw, and I thought that it was like, just, man, I it was a missed opportunity for me. And it doesn't matter if you think it was a balloon or not. It really doesn't. At the end of the day, if there is no provenance, you don't show that video. For me, it's really that simple. I'm on the fence on what it is still, because there are some frames of the video that made me think that it's not a balloon, but that was my issue. I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Mhm.
Ryan, what about you? What do you think you think they could have improved or that
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was really good. I don't even know what I would pinpoint in terms of what I think they could have improved. Um, I've saw some criticism on Twitter, like 5 minutes for with each representative, was not long enough. I don't know. Yeah, I tend to I don't have a real strong opinion regarding the video. But yeah, if you don't have provenance, then you're always susceptible to counterintelligence. I mean, if I was working for the CIA, a lot of people think I do work for the CIA, but if I was working for the CIA and I wanted to mess things up and be uh, contribute to doubt and muddying the waters, that's exactly what I would want to do. I would get my colleagues to create a video that would look impressive on the surface, but then would later be found to be mundane or prosaic or even a hoax. So, I think that Burleson was taking a risk. On the other hand, we hear from Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, they knew about such a video where something was shot at, a UAP was shot at, but we don't know if the video, because I don't think either of them have seen the video. So we don't know if the video Burleson got was that video. But yeah, I mean, I thought the like, I'm not expert or that learned on how to conduct a hearing, so I don't even feel like I would know where to go with that. But just thought it was really great, and I absolutely love that George Knapp was part of it. You don't need only firsthand witnesses to contribute to educating the public and pressuring the U.S. government. George Knapp, some considered him the standout witness, even though he's never had, as far as I know, any personal sighting of a UAP. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Hmm.
And yeah,
I'll
what about
just,
you? Yeah.
yeah, just on the video, I mean, it's challenging to disclose the chain of custody of a video like that because it ends up making whistleblowers out of people who weren't intending to be. There seems to be kind of like this desperate knee-jerk thrust of media into the UAP space, like, please take this, spread it, please have this conversation, but I can't tell you where it comes from because that would be the end of career or worse. And I get that. I'm not like Ryan. I'm no expert on the proceedings of a congressional hearing to weigh in on what should have been done specifically. Um, I'm happy something came out. I think it's the optics are pretty eye-popping if it is a true UAP being impacted by a Hellfire missile and the missile bouncing off and the UAP not, disintegrating as it normally would. I mean, that's definitely eye-opening for decision makers out there to say the game has changed. It's not, normal conventional craft. It's non-conventional craft using unconventional weapons at this point. So the game has changed geopolitically, I would say. There were some interesting we'd heard them before, but it was good to hear them on the record and at length by Knapp on the files he brought back from the USSR regarding these 45 in-air altercations between Soviet jets and UAP, in which I believe he said 3 jets crashed and 2 pilots were killed. Now, looking back at the Cold War, there were maybe double that many crashes and deaths between Soviet and American aircraft. So these altercations with UAP are at like a 50 to 60% mark compared to the altercations between the two superpowers. I mean, that suggests to me a prevalent phenomenon that is in the airspace of contested areas that is performing dangerous flight maneuvers. And if you look back in the UFO uh, UAP history, you see a definite record of in-air altercations between UAP and craft, both civilian and military. So thought that was important. I did have to say, and I'm sure you'll understand why, given my focus, is the intelligence behind UAP, the intelligent indicators, signs, signals that these craft are giving off that suggest that not only are they under intelligent control, but intentful control, evasive control, right? That they're capable of intercepting both technological communications, like we saw in the Nimitz encounter, right? Understanding the cap point of these two Navy jets, but potentially at a psi level or at a consciousness-based level, interpreting or anticipating the intentions of both flight crew and ground personnel. So that's my focus. And I saw Congress people, men and women, come right up again to this question of, is this NHI? Is this extraterrestrial? I thought there was a definite clear moment in the hearing when it was just screaming like a red light on my dashboard. It's NHI by elimination. It was when Dylan Borland was asked, you know, do you view this as extraterrestrial? Something like that. I have the quote here somewhere. And he said, well, ma'am, I'm not sure I'm legally allowed to tell you that or you're legally allowed to hear it. Right. And then later on, about 30 minutes later, he was queried again. And he basically said in the reverse that his conclusion was that this was not us and that extraterrestrial was the assessment, something to that effect. And so there's a lot of walking around the nature of the phenomenon. No one wants to say it and everyone's thinking it. And I think that's interesting. Why is that? What is that unspoken rule book that says don't call it alien or extraterrestrial? I think it came out in this hearing very powerfully that um, the secret keepers have been using the extraterrestrial word as both a shield to say, and Dylan articulated it perfectly. He said, in order to prove an extraterrestrial origin, you have to go to that other planet, gain a piece of technology as a baseline and compare it to the technology we have on Earth. Therefore, you can wipe your hands clean. There's never going to be a conclusion regarding extraterrestrial. Perfect shield. But I've talked to many guests on my show. I was talking to Matthew Shadagas of SCU and UAPX recently, and he's of a similar mind to mine that the conclusion of most government inquiries and on the ground reports by senior ranking military has been an extraterrestrial hypothesis of origin. And yet there's been a concerted effort to keep people from thinking or concluding that it is extraterrestrial. And that's, I think, where we understand that we're potentially over the target with that word, because I do think there are a lot of indications that we're dealing with that as an aspect of the phenomenon.
Right. And even the conversation came up about Arrow and
Mm,
their the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and how they're communicating to the public. And again, the whole question of extraterrestrial, they made a public comment saying, the Arrow didn't find proof of extraterrestrial technology or visitation through their investigation. But again, how could you prove that if you don't have anything to compare it to? And that's why, terms like of unknown origin, non-human intelligence, and anomalous are used because they allow for a broader possibility. And that conversation kind of goes both ways because uh, the assessment in the legacy program could very well be that, like, probability wise, some of the stuff is extraterrestrial intelligence, right? As best they can conclude, rather than, again, the conversation comes up, and there is some wisdom in it, but like the interdimensional hypothesis, but that is also confusing. And then it's like, what does that even mean? Like,
Hmm.
you can't point to anything in that regard. So
Right.
it
It's a bit
it
of the kitchen sink of theories in that, okay, there are physical markers, there are potentially biological markers, there's definitely sentient markers, there's entity encounters, there's direct physical encounters, there's abductions, okay, and yet we just can't go there yet. And so let's go to the kitchen sink and the interdimensional hypothesis. I remember a couple scientists whimsically saying, like, I don't even know what they're saying with that, right?
yeah.
This is literal theory. This is like high level degrees of string theory and quantum mechanics. And it's not been demonstrated that alternate dimensional spaces exist that could cause a structured craft and a potential biological entity to magically appear in our world. So there seems to be some mental gymnastics to kind of land there first. I wouldn't rule it out. And I wouldn't rule out that the technology has allowed whatever this intelligence is to bridge space time and to manipulate it and to cause an interdimensional type effect in how they transit and appear. But yeah, it's just interesting in this hearing. I looked up all the uses of the word non-human intelligence, extraterrestrial, and it seemed to be the line that everyone was inching towards, but didn't want to. Who wants to put their first toe over that line, and be the one to say? I thought we saw with David Grush at the first set of hearings these claims of biologics. We see with Jay Stratton's recent comments in the Age of Disclosure, I have seen alien bodies. And that's no new assertion, by the way. That is a tremendously common assertion among military firsthand witnesses. Maybe not whistleblowers, didn't come to Congress, but they have spoken up over the last 60 years. Bodies with evolved morphologies, evidence that these entities evolved under the pressures of some potential planetary environment or interstellar one. So I think that should predispose our thinking in terms of where do we start? When we think of, quote, the phenomenon, which is this kind of category, overinflated category to include now at this point almost anything non-human, we have to vector back in on this phenomenon of hard structured physical craft that are having real physical effects with military installations, military vehicles in the air on the ground, and with people on the ground. And we saw that in the hearing as well. We heard of electromagnetic effects, a cell phone, becoming hyper hot and then not working, and so on. So that reality of close encounters or close approaches on the ground is another one that we heard.
Yeah, and again, with the kind of extraterrestrial interdimensional, I mean, when you get into the interdimensional hypothesis, I mean, it could be getting into things that are in people's religions, right? So that's kind of a touchy subject, but um, it's potentially factually inferred, right? That
Mhm.
humans have been interacting with non-human intelligences for millennia, right? As long as there's been human history, there's uh, reports or stories of humans
Yeah.
interacting with sky people, and it's in angels, demons, jinn, ashura, devas. It's in basically every religion there is.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I also the I mean for sure with the hearing, the witness lists were cooperative witnesses, right?
Mm,
And I guess a lot. I mean, I'd like to hear from people that maybe don't want to take the stand, and but I understand. Before the hearing took place, uh, people were talking about like Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, like what the risks that these whistleblowers would have to take, especially firsthand witnesses, right? So,
Firsthand witnesses of the legacy program in particular.
correct.
Yeah.
People that have hands-on with
well,
non-human intelligence or extraterrestrial materials, reverse engineering and retrieval. So that's
mhm.
I'd personally I'd love to hear from General McCaslin, right? Uh, and people of if that story is true that Tom DeLonge talks about meeting him in the airport and uh, they said that it was the height of the Cold War and we found a life form, right? I'd love to
Mhm.
hear him testify.
Mm.
Uh,
I mean, we heard Glenn Gaffney outed on
right.
stage. Seemed to
Yeah.
be Corbell whispering that over the shoulder of Knapp. And I often wonder, like, okay, I had Danny Sheehan on my show last week, and he was dropping a lot regarding these hearings, regarding the national security state controlling the hearings in effect, as well as the UAPDA, its formation, uh, its its writing as a document. Pretty eye-opening, if true. But to hear names like Glenn Gaffney dropped, it makes me wonder, well, okay, why doesn't someone build a dossier on these individuals who are becoming well acknowledged to be involved, at least, if not to be, instrumental in maintaining the secrecy and in suppressing its disclosure, and look at where did they go outside government when they left government? Draw the wireframe of companies, startups, intergovernmentals, if there is a non-US based aspect to it. It's not conspiratorial. It's literally who hired them next and what role did they get. That's not hard information to go find. And I think there could be more citizen activist work done to penetrate this seeming blob of covert operation and whistleblower suppression, secrecy, intimidation, threats. It's dark. It's a blob, and yet it obviously has clear structure. And we're seeing that, with the Immaculate Constellation document coming through, Matthew Brown's testimony, and others. Like there, some recent reporting by Matt Ford and Chris Sharp, Jason Boswell, I think is his name. Basically discussing, what is the structure, the internal structure of this secrecy apparatus? How does it tie into private sector defense? How does it tie into academia? Right? It's almost like the blood vessels know no boundaries, right? There's no discrete gap between this program and other aspects of society. And I would also say NHI as well. Like there is potentially, and in all likelihood, a reality of some interface in the crash retrieval program, which could be a form of technological seeding or a Trojan set of technology being introduced purposefully. There could be some interaction, if not collaboration, certainly competition or conflict, because we're hearing about these UAP shootdowns increasingly, which I do believe are definitely a reality. And we saw a potential video of one of those, which is quite interesting to see that come out after Ross Coulthart's recent commentary on the use of directed microwave energy weapons to take down UAP using psionics as well. That's also a component of it. So this whole thing is going from gray to like defined lines. And I think citizen activists could do more to start to hunt down what are the lines, what are the relational lines between government, the private sector, and beyond, because we heard it in the hearing. It was said, I think, directly, and I have known about this for decades, that there was a shift to take this UAP, NHI related program out of government into the private sector. We heard it during the hearing. It was because of the enactment of FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, to take it out of the purview of what that law could provide citizens. So they're running, right? To your point, Ryan, there's a there. If they're doing if they're making those kind of gymnastics and maneuvers that suggest that there is a concerted effort to keep something of either high value, high threat, or high profitability from at least the American public, if not the global public. And so I think we can hunt it down and chase it down in even more intelligent ways than we are.
I just want to say, like, regarding, the origin of these, I think one reason people gravitate toward the interdimensional hypothesis is because of the hitchhiker effect. I know that Dr. Eric Davis has stated before that, and I think he was being hyperbolic. I mean, in my impression, but he said that every UFO encounter has a hitchhiker effect or like a poltergeist component to it. And a lot of people who have had encounters with UAP, they have these experiences and they don't even report it because they're already talking about something that is so otherworldly. They feel self-conscious and they don't want to report that. So I can understand why people might gravitate toward the um, interdimensional hypothesis. And I want to read something here, which is really interesting. This was posted on September 9th. I saw journalist Christopher Sharp retweet it. Someone named Kyle Warfel emailed Susan Goff, who's
Yeah.
like, I don't know. What is she now? What is she doing these days? I don't know. But subject, arrow question, and the copy. Thanks, Susan. Can I amend your statement with consent to include non-human intelligence and unknown intelligence in addition to extraterrestrial? To confirm this would still be accurate. To confirm this would still be accurate for arrow and its predecessor's question mark. She responds, Kyle, no, you may not amend my statement. Which is unbelievable. And then she goes on to say, I can confirm that to date, the Department of Defense has not found any verifiable evidence that any UAP incident is a result of extraterrestrial activity. I mean, this is so
Busted.
this is
The
this
chosen word.
this is so suspicious. And yes, I do think Arrow and the national security apparatus is hiding behind extraterrestrial, because as the witness, I think his name was Dylan Boylan. Is that what his name?
Dylan.
Borland.
Borland.
Yeah, Dylan Borland stated like the only way to prove it's extraterrestrial is to go to those worlds and bring some technology back. So they're hiding behind that. And it's no wonder that the people who were contributing in writing the UAP Disclosure Act were adamant about calling it non-human intelligence, because they're aware of this lawyer ball that the national security apparatus is playing. But yeah, I mean, the origin of NHI, I mean, it's the most fascinating question. And I'm not totally sold it's all from other worlds. I mean, and here's the reason I would caution against assuming that. Not that that's not true. I don't know if that's true or not. But the reason I'd caution against that is because we are dealing with something we have so little information on. And our greatest minds and our greatest institutions for decades have scoffed at this whole thing. So we don't want to replicate that in our own way by saying, well, of course it's coming from other worlds because that's the most likely. Maybe it is the most likely, and it does seem to be most likely. But I think it'd be dangerous to assume that none of it could be coming from another origin, particularly maybe something that's even native to the Earth. I think that's plausible. Is it as likely as other planets? Strictly speaking, probably not. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
we
mean,
would we would see the evidence of a co-inhabiting ultra-terrestrial physical entity in civilization. Where are the heaps of, sludge and mining tailings and, the emissions? But, if there is a skipping in and out of dimensional spaces, or that's a component, as some theorize, can't rule it out. But, yeah, I think there's a zone of probabilities, and we can go outside of it for sure, and we should actually, I think. But in terms of activating society to respond, there's only so much the global public can handle regarding theories of origin. And if it's muddied by default and dead on delivery, that's also part of the problem. I think people by and large can handle an extraterrestrial theory of origin. We're all learning about exoplanetary systems, the proclivity of life to arise in extreme environments, etc. People think in those terms. And when I introduce the interdimensional, people give me this sideways glance like, you mean like my dead relatives or the angels that look over us? I mean, and why would I? Because there's structured craft with entities engaging with humans in physical way. Like, it's unnecessary to go into those components of what is, I don't doubt, possibly part of reality. Like, and again, I think NHI now, it's at risk of this category inflation to the point where it is a catch-all for every phenomena, right? That is anomalous. When, could that also be a part of the obfuscation effort, which is we really don't want the global public to see that there's a structured phenomenon of physical craft engaging and altercating with us in the air and the ocean of the globe. And so please start thinking about everything that might be out there, expand beyond and to the point where your brain falls out when there's a physical phenomenon right there in front of us. So a question I grapple with is, how does a species like our own, living stuck on the surface of an island world, thinking it's alone in the universe, process the potential event of first engagement, first negotiation of intent, and the potential technology transfer across species? Like, how does that actually happen? And I think we need to be thinking out on those front lines without, of course, ruling out or negating other possibilities.
Can I interject a little bit? Because I think that uh, one of the most interesting stories that stays in the back of my mind all the time is Dr. Michael Masters, uh, because what he wrote and the whole interactions that he claims to have had are very reminiscent of past events that were very similar. We can go all the way back to Dr. Puharich. I believe that your father, Reed, also had
Mm-hmm.
like contact, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and what Masters I think brought to the table is one of the hypotheses that is barely talked about, really, because it's kind of hard to grapple with, as you say, the time displacement sort of
Mm-hmm.
aspect of all of this. And I think that we should pay a little more attention to the history of all of this topic, all the way back to 1933, to the magenta stuff, and moving forward to the story about Harold Malmgren, that final part of the
Right.
episode he did with Jesse Michaels, where he's directly point blank asked about the time element. He
Mm.
he says that he feels like it could be something related to that, and there are some these synchronicities with people that get involved in the topic that feel like they're like pulled towards getting involved. And I'm pretty sure that all of you
Mhm.
have felt that at some point in this journey. And it's just aspects of this that we just cannot ignore. And I know that it's probably going to be one of the last things that we get to find out if there is some kind of time displacement aspect
Mm.
to this. But I think that we should keep it in the back of our heads and keep
Mhm.
Michael Masters close also, because he's always like really open about everything that he works on it and all of his thought processes, and he's very open about that contact experience, and he says that he's still in contact with these entities. And um I just wonder if like mm, could this secrecy be related to some kind of um time aspect. i just
Mm.
I just wanted to say that because I think it's
Mhm.
important too.
Yeah, I go back to Matt Pine's tweet about a defense official who said to him in a hallway at some point that AI, quantum, and the Grush stuff are three sides of the same triangle. I go back to that often, and I'm not surprised. I don't think this is nuts and bolts. We're way beyond nuts and bolts. We're way beyond just even bodies and biologics as an addition to that. I think we are coming into contact with entities that have capabilities far surpassing our own, that have found ways to technologically and psychologically interact with realms, layers of reality beyond just sight, smell, touch, 3D. And I think we should be careful not to place them as gods of that higher realm, right? As deities within it or super entities akin to our own angels and the gods of our scriptures and the authors of our own humanity. And many people do. They rush to that kind of conclusion, just like the native peoples did in the Americas, interfacing with the colonial powers coming over the seas with great technology, the ability to fire projectiles faster than the eye could perceive, right? That's impossible. But a cell phone was impossible 80 years ago, right? And here I've got one right here. So technology, I go back to that famous quote, advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, you know, and I think we are kind of predisposed to be amazed by it. It's certainly being demonstrated in front of us. There seem to be intentional displays of presence by UAP at specific times. So there is a display of technological ability for whatever end. I don't know. But we should guard our perception and anchor into, you know, um, the needs of our human species as we potentially interface with a non-human reality that may not value us the way we value ourselves. And, again, going to that, we see that all over the encounter phenomenon, that there seems to be this kind of orthogonal, penetrating nature of the phenomenon. It doesn't ask for consent. It does what it does. And many experiencers, even those who report good experiences, have to kind of reverse engineer the experience as good, in the sense that this was a soul contract to be taken and to be upgraded or to be medically, serviced. I've heard all of this said in a beneficial light, and that's worrying to me. That looks like the native species, abandoning logic and common sense to kind of to justify the activities of the unknown. So,
Well,
a lot to
and
talk about here. Good stuff.
yeah, no, Reed, I did want to ask you about your father, Marshall Summers, in the sense, and to know what you're talking about actually is, didn't he have communications with different types of entities?
Hmm. Yes.
And so what does he describe, or what his process of trying to say, well, these entities are potentially helpful and these
Hmm.
other ones may be deceptive. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a long journey. He's a great, great guy to talk to. Amazing human being. I highly recommend having him on or discussing this with him, because I'm not the expert on his life. He is, but um, he was a highly gifted telepathic individual, and also he was a teacher of relationships. He taught extensively for many years about forming healthy relationships, the maintaining of autonomy, personal free will, and sovereignty in the context of authentic relating with others, unhealthy relationships, getting out of them, etc. So he was a human. He was a humanist, and a very wise person when it came to these topics of how to be grounded and centered in one's own and engage with life, a life of forces and intentions, that some of which are very complementary, some of which are oppositional. So in that context, yes, he had a contact experience. I would say this took place initially for him in the late 70s. Now, he would describe this as a non-physical, non-human intelligence. So something more angelic or spiritual in nature, but which had a voice, an intention. It spoke to him, it guided him in his work. Um, and that was a major source of that's really became his focus, actually, was how to engage with entities beyond the physical plane, teaching people how to do that, actually. Spiritual teachers, as he would call these presences. And you look throughout religion and in history, and people have always claimed to have an interface with entities outside the human, outside the physical. Um, and that's a component of our journey as human beings, the spiritual layer to life and whatever exists there. So I don't think it's anything more exotic than that. Um, but in the late 90s, Marshall says he was contacted by a group of entities, physical extraterrestrial beings, who were, in a sense, who were present in the nearby region of the Earth, observing the sudden onset of a visitation taking place on Earth, by extraterrestrial presences that did not have humanity's best interests in mind. And so this is kind of part of the exopolitical layer of what Marshall seems to have engaged with, and we talk about the Cold War that might be at play between different NHI. That there seems to be different entities with different intentions. There seems to be some conflict in the air. I've heard that as recently from Skywatcher, that they've observed what looks like UAP chasing off UAP from the range. Now, that's not conclusive to say that's NHI, right? Because that could be black budget stuff. That could be China. I actually think there's a component that's definitely active in that sense. But there seems to be a variety of non-human intelligences taking a specific interest and not just observing, but engaging in an incursion into our human Earth system and interfacing with humanity in different ways. So Marshall seems to have tapped into some some network of communications between and amongst such intelligences, and that's what he's published. That's his work. So we talk about NHI. I think that can encompass non-human, non-physical, but also non-human physical. And I know it's almost like it's like a broad scattershot attempt to describe the ecosystem. Like we're species in an ecosystem. Well, it's an exosystem now. It's exo. It's non-human, non-Earth. And there could be layers to life out there. There could be intents of all kinds. There could be just about everything. The question is, what's engaging us now? Why? And are there specific triggers that have taken place on Earth that have prompted that? And I think there are some strong signals there.
That reminds me of,
Oh, go
Pavel,
ahead. Go ahead.
sorry. That reminds me of John Keel's concept of the super spectrum, and how humans in this day and age now, we're becoming more like sensitive to those other layers of it,
Mhm.
and we're starting to see more and more of it. And I don't know if that is indicative of possibly some kind of next step in evolution, because
Yeah.
yeah, so it reminds me of that. I'm sorry, Ryan.
Yeah, real quickly, what Reed was saying really ties into my alien AI hypothesis. And I'll preface that I am not committed to any theory or perspective. Yes, alien AI hypothesis is my pet hypothesis, but that doesn't mean I sell it as the gospel, right? It's my bias and my tendency. And I like what Reed said about like people back engineering their experiences with NHI and coming up with ideas like soul contracts and so forth. And that I think it's reasonable for some people to perceive that as kind of meandering into a lack of common sense. I don't have a position on that, right? I'm trying to stay as fluid as I can, but I can see that as a valid perspective. Now, here's kind of, and I do think one of the dangers, and I'm guilty of it, is we can over mythologize, we can over spiritualize, but on the other hand, we could be deficient in spiritualizing and in mythologizing. But one of the reasons I am prone to believe there is something to my alien AI hypothesis is because if there are so many intelligences, physical and non-physical, and even considering they don't even get along with each other necessarily. Yes, Skywatcher has recently gone into that a little bit, but I know that David Grush has said he's heard that they don't all get along. So that begs the question within an ecology of different consciousnesses, why are they all in cahoots, if you will, or conspiring to withhold disclosure and allow for what the status quo has been for so long, which is consensus reality is that we are alone. And yet that contrasts with the potential that we are not alone. And not only we are not alone, but there are species and species that are engaging our world, regardless of where they're from. And that's why I do see an evolutionary current flowing through the disclosure process. And it doesn't mean that all of the intelligence have to be conspiring together to say, okay, we're all going to operate in a certain way so that we don't force disclosure. There could be things we don't understand or have a frame of reference for. And the example I've used in the past are orcas, which are apex predators in the ocean. They are some nasty creatures. If you read about them, they've been
Don't want
known
to be a seal in the presence of an orca.
Yeah, they've been known to like with their tails to push them up into the sky 40, 50 feet and then maybe not even end up eating them. Or they'll trail other whale species for a long time and finally catch up with their calves, their children, and they will consume it in front of the mother or the father. Whether they do that intentionally, I'm sure that's debated by biologists, but it does seem like they get some kind of satisfaction out of it. So they're I don't know how to put it. They have a mean streak, shall we say, and they eat great whites. They consume I think the livers of great whites and don't eat the rest. Man, it might be biological, but it just maybe because they need that nutrients and they don't care for the other parts of the great white. But it still demonstrates the tenacity of orcas, and yet if you are snorkeling in the middle of the ocean and there's a couple orcas, I don't advocate anyone trying this. I wouldn't do it. But there has not been one incident in recorded history. I'm not talking about captivity, but in the wild, there has not been one incident of an orca doing anything violent to a human being while they're in the ocean, but yet they're violent to seals and they just do some really nasty things. So why is that? So there's two possibilities. One possibility is that they're all in cahoots, right? Even with whales they've never met. Maybe there's like some oral tradition and they've decided they're not going to kill humans. I doubt that's the case. There's something about humans, whatever it is, where they just don't mess with humans. They don't eat them. They don't kill them. They don't do anything aggressive to humans. So my point is that the fact that there hasn't been disclosure, the fact that there could be an ecology of intelligences, and they have not disclosed themselves, may have a mechanism that we just don't understand. And it's not as simple as, well, they're all in cahoots with each other. Why would they all be in cahoots with each other? They don't even necessarily all get along or like each other. So disclosure could be a new beginning of sorts within the human experience, whatever that means or however that manifests. I don't know, but it's just a speculative idea.
Yeah, I mean, many point out that, NHI have not wiped us out. They have not been overtly hostile or destructively hostile at a large scale. So, therefore, that must mean a whole set of conclusions, which I don't think are necessarily indicated at all. There's a whole other set of possibilities there. Like, that orcas don't consume humans doesn't mean orcas aren't dangerous. If you're another life form, or if the environment didn't change and their food source wasn't wiped out, for example, would they change behaviorally? Possibly, right? So we don't understand the ecosystem or the ecology of the exopolitical environment. I can probably say with some certainty that whatever they are, based on what they are doing, how they're operating, there is a system into which they are engaged. There are entities, forces that may never have been even on Earth that they engage with. What these transits are not happening in this vacuum of the Earth, right? There is a contiguous space beyond the Earth, and we don't know. We don't know what these craft do outside our solar system, or on other bodies in the solar system. So, yeah, we don't understand the rules of the game, whatever the game is that encompasses our world. That's a challenge. We might need some exopolitical intelligence or intel to help us through that. But also, there's a lot of strategic ambiguity right now in terms of the presence of UAP and their activity. And there is a state of non-disclosure by both human and non-human potentially at play. And so why is that? Are they waiting for disclosure later? Are they getting us ready for a disclosure of a certain kind? I mean, a lot of people who report direct encounters talk about being mentally conditioned to play a certain role at a certain time in, quote, the event. That's a commonly reported narrative among experiencers. So, is there some sort of shaping of society, social engineering, the mimetic spread of belief systems about NHI and their involvement with humanity in ancient times or in the present? Because there's a lot of wild beliefs spreading out there, and people buy them hook, line, and sinker. So, where are those coming from? And there's just so many unknown unknowns. I think it sounds super speculative to talk about this for many people. Like, they just can't go there. This NHI is too much speculation. They can't even talk about NHI influence or involvement, right? Or a programmatic engagement with the human program, or NHI infrastructure, aka bases, centers of operation, staging of equipment. It's possible that through the photographic negative, meaning what we don't know, what has not been disclosed, the total lack of physical evidence, but in the presence of a global pervasive phenomenon that has to be capable of leaving physical evidence, that there is a whole photographic positive that we can begin to at least frame out as possible, and then begin to go figure out if some of that is true. And I think this is the challenging front lines of the phenomenon. This is why I started a platform called Forerunner for people who are on the front lines dealing with these questions. If they're experiencers, it's not an option. The phenomenon is in their face, right? They have to figure this out for themselves to stay sovereign and empowered and not give in to despondency and depression, which a lot of experiencers do. There's a reason why we hear a lot of people talk about positive NHI encounters, is because those with negative encounters are they're not talking. They're not doing well. They don't want to communicate. They don't feel safe communicating with other humans, let alone outside of that. So it's not a space that's conducive to understanding what the testimonial record really indicates. So there's a lot of positive pathways forward in this. a lot of projects that could be created to go figure out what's happening on the ground. Um, but yeah, to your point, Ryan, why does the orca do what it does? We don't know, right? We don't know the orca's code. We don't know its psychology. And when we talk about NHI, thousands of years more advanced than our own, in an exopolitical environment of multiple interacting intelligences, which we've never experienced, at least on a grand scale. Like, we're an island world with an island mentality, and we might be encountering a continental reality of multiple different entities that have had thousands of years to interact, to collaborate, to compete, and to develop. So we're disadvantaged. And that's why, like, sobriety, caution, logic, I think, are super important as people kind of process this phenomenon.
Yeah, well, Reed, and I want to get your perspective on if non-human intelligence were to announce its presence of, like, officially to the world on a grand scale. Number one, would that be seen as a hostile act enforcing their presence on us? I mean, they're already here, but that
Mhm.
very assertive action, right? Would that be seen as hostile, number one? And number two, what would you see as the rules of engagement for like, say, a benevolent intelligence that would want to interact with us?
Great questions. I mean, I've talked to some folks who are inside the defense establishment. I've talked to whistleblowers. Let me just say, in summary and in distillation, there is tremendous concern about a mass appearance, a mass
Yeah.
reveal, a communication being made, and the domination of the narrative and the shaping of public perception, not just about NHI, but about humans, about human government, human leadership, the crimes and things that have been done human on human. So the potential for narrative manipulation and a psychological operation of non-human origin, I am being told, is very real and is of top concern. So I'll just put that on the side. That's not even my concern. That's the concern of others who know a lot more than me about all this. I think it would be seen as a hostile act, certainly if not coordinated. I've looked into this a bit. I don't see any alleged record of NHI influence upon intergovernmental bodies like the United Nations, the World Bank, the World Health Organization. I mean, of course, it would be highly testimonial and unsubstantiated if it was said. So I'm not saying if it was said that means it happened, but I have seen no peep as to any effort by whatever the presence is to engage bodies that strengthen a unified human position. We have seen evidence of potential engagements with competing defense entities, national security apparatuses that are in active conflict with each other. That's concerning. The whole tech transfer, to me, is concerning. The race to AGI is concerning. There are a lot of trends in technology, transhumanism, big data, surveillance, et cetera, that may have no connection to NHI at all, but they're endemic trends in human societal development that could at some point be used for some purpose. Maybe the NHI would think it's a good purpose. It's a much better one than ours, but it doesn't matter. It could be used. It's an exploitable vulnerability. And we human beings present several 100,000 of such vulnerabilities to the universe, not least of which is that we've basically leaked our entire species data set into space, right? So we've been technologically transmitting via radio and other technologies into space indiscriminately for over 70 years. It's all out there. And so that data could be ingested and used to develop an interpretive model, a model that could potentially influence perspective, perception, and ultimately even thought, especially if paired with these brain to mind interface technologies that some governments have been developing, which is itself kind of alarming. I think of slide 9 here. All of these psychotronic weapons that apparently have been developed, non contact weapons, neurostrike on the Chinese side. Like, is this all endemic? Did this all just get, thought up by us? Or was there any form of accidental or intentional technological transfer that stimulated these developments? I think we have to be asking that question. But back to your question, James, about a sudden mass reveal. I mean, where are we right now with the Atlas 9 event? Avi Loeb is out there thumping that drum every day. So I mean, it could happen at any time. I don't I would not trust it to be a natural occurrence. I would say someone would either create it or use it for their purposes as a disclosure event. And so I think that is somewhat high risk. I think we might have been seeing possibly some expression of that in the drone crisis last November, right after the November hearing, weeks before the new administration takes office, in that very vulnerable spot in American democracy, right? When there was an attack on the Capitol in the former transition of power, like, there's a lot of uncertainties, right? And here we see this mass display. And I have talked to a lot of people who know everything about UAS and UAV, not UAP, UAS, unmanned aerial systems. And what was up there was not entirely of prosaic origin. There was some up there that was of prosaic origin, I think. I think the defense community threw up their kit to cloud the skies and make it a little bit more ambiguous. But that could have been some effort of a psychological operation on the American public, in part to seed distrust and lack of confidence in the new administration being able to disclose. Because now, if the administration discloses, well, look what they said about the drone crisis. FAA approved prosaic craft, nothing to see here. Are you going to trust what the administration says about a non-human UAP present? Many Americans wouldn't, probably more than half. And so that's disclosure. There's a disclosure equation I talk a lot about. Disclosure equals source times evidence times trust. Source, evidence, trust. Well, if trust is plummeting to zero, it doesn't matter what the source and the evidence is. And if
We
AI and
also,
other trends are plummeting trust even further, to your point, Pavel, about the unverified video shared at the hearings, that's a big problem. Americans are going to need some way of verifying a true UAP based on the instrumentation standards, the data collection modalities that were used, which is a project that's underway at the moment, actually.
we also have to keep Dr. Villarroel's work in mind, because I think that's
Hmm.
going to be very important as well.
Right.
Yeah, and then I mean, there's the conflation of let's say there is a non-human intelligence that is running their own perception management campaign uh, on humans, for better or worse. There's also been decades of obfuscation by human actors, right? And
Mhm.
let's even say it's all been in our best interest. Trying to parse through that and say what part of the human obfuscation is influenced by non-human intelligence or just on their own. And it comes into the thing of like what can you actually trust, right? If
Mhm.
there's been let's just say 70 or 80 years of disinformation, right? And the
Right.
source of that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to be able to really even broach those questions until we have something of a start on the path of UAP transparency.
Mhm.
But if these intelligences are so advanced, like it's like how could you ever consider that we have a good handle on what's going on if there's a civilization 1,000 years ahead of us, even, right? Like 1,000 years ago, we wouldn't recognize ourselves in some ways, right? Uh, Technologically, at least, maybe even socially and culturally.
Mhm.
But uh, how can we even begin to think that we have a handle on what's going on, even with UFO transparency, even with disclosure?
Yeah.
And
I would love to circle the question of rules of engagement. Like, well, then what do we do? What should we do in the presence of a non-disclosing, non-human set of actors? What should we do? I mean, we can't rely on the government to do the right thing. I definitely do not think we can. I don't think they're necessarily the cause of everything that's gone wrong. I think it's a mess. It's a rat's nest, and so we either unpack the rat's nest to get to the truth, or we go somewhere else to uncover the truth. So I'm curious what everyone thinks. How should
and
we respond?
if history,
I would prefer open contact personally. I mean,
yeah,
if they're going to be here and they're going to engage humanity and which up into and including abductions, I rather us be fully aware of who they are, where they come from, even if they lie to us. I rather them lie to us than indirectly lying to us, because they're lying to us whether um, there's a mass sighting or open contact. Like if that doesn't happen, they're still lying to us because they're engaging humanity in a way that allows us to choose our own adventure. And then you could easily argue that that is a much more dangerous lie. At
Mhm.
least if they presented themselves, we could choose to believe them. We could choose to disbelieve them. But yet they are engaging humanity in a way where we don't even have consensus agreement on their presence. And to me, there's a toxicity to that. And by the way, don't forget that in the brief article that broke the David Grush story, in the like one of the last sentences, David Grush explicitly stated that he is concerned that there will be an open contact event, and he thinks there should be disclosure to prepare the world for that, so it doesn't come from left field.
Yeah.
That's funny because if you talk to experiencers, like for example Chris Bledsoe or others, they would tell you that they're constantly engaging in contact and they know exactly what's going on, and and that puzzles me quite a bit. And to what you were saying, James, of NHI engaging in perception management, if that's true, they've been doing it for millennia now, not in the last 80 years. In the last 80 years, humans have been doing it.
Right.
Uh, but
Mm.
and if we want to connect to the ancient history and ancient scripture, there was a direct engagement according to a lot of the texts that have been that still exist to this day, and it kind of feels like something went wrong back then. Um,
Mm.
if we want to like pay attention to uh, the parts that like remain constant, like the flood, like uh, potential even crossbreeding and all that stuff, it kind of sounds like something went terribly wrong. So I don't know if today we're more ready for sort of open contact like Ryan suggests. I would think we might be, but we're still violent um, monkeys,
Mhm.
most of us. So maybe this is sort of like a litmus test that we still haven't passed. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
gradual inoculation, uh, through
I'm,
individuals, incidents, which over many decades to them could be a blink of an eye of to them if they're billions, if their civilization has been evolving for millions of years, even a few hundred or few thousand years would be a blink to what they could consider as a an agenda, even if they would consider that we're talking about a non-human intelligence agenda, that they may think is in our best interest, and maybe the same thing happened to them, right? I mean, there's
Mhm.
so many
Sure.
directions of speculation you can go into that. Uh, I
And
really
James,
think,
that's why the malevolence argument or the demonic theory of origin, which I understand why that would arise, right, from a traditional religious mindset. I just think it's totally unnecessary to approach the phenomenon. Like, they're not evil. They don't have to be evil or bad to be taking people. They just have a different value system and a different valuation system of us as the object and them as subject. We think of ourselves as subject and them as object. We're going to go investigate them. We're going to go find them out. I mean, by and large, I would say that they would see it the opposite way. And so, this could be a negotiation, a first negotiation of systems of valuing everything from individuality, self-expression, organic growth. I mean, maybe they come from an exopolitical environment where nothing grows organically. Everything is seeded. Everything is genetically manipulated. That's rules of the day. And we have this notion of indigenous identity. And some might say, that's bollocks. They've been manipulating us the whole way, or seeding us and our I mean, maybe we have no power, but I can't live that way. I can't make a decision from a state of being
well,
possessed by NHI since the dawn of time.
I mean, that's why I think the human potential aspect is crucial, because developing our own capabilities of if you want to say psi or many other factors, right? I love the Istok Bentov bell curve graph where he's talking about, our evolution and, on the latter scale of that graph, humans becoming aware of non-physical realities, which, let's say, extraterrestrial intelligence may interface with that realm, right? Technologically, and we're just becoming aware of it. But
Yeah.
I'm kind of on board with Ryan as far as, rip the Band-Aid off.
Mhm.
If they've been engaging with individuals, why not on a larger scale? But that also is somewhat reliant on us disclosing the UFO reality to ourselves, because how else can we, engage on a mass scale without first acknowledging non-human intelligence, UFOs, extraterrestrial intelligence?
Mhm.
Here's an idea, and is there really gradual inoculation? I mean, consider the collateral damage of gradual inoculation, and which is part of my alien AI hypothesis. I have suspected that these non-human intelligences, whether they're doing it intentionally or whether there's some kind of evolutionary current that's guiding the whole thing that we don't have a frame of reference for, or a combination of the two, or to some extent one, to some extent the other. Who is going to take the fall? Which is something I've stated a lot. Who is going to take the fall with disclosure? And the answer is so simple. Everyone knows it. It's governments. Is that a coincidence? Is that happenstance? I would say likely not. I would say that this gradual inoculation has been at least partially intended so that when we get disclosure, the relationship between governments and the governed shifts. And I think this is my bias, and I acknowledge that, but there seems to be very little probability that they're not well aware of that. And because they're well aware of that, they're very comfortable with it. And because they're very comfortable with it, they actually want that. Now, here's another idea just to throw into the pile of what we've been exploring. And that is, what if part of human evolution is to actually have relationships with some of these intelligences? What if that is actually natural as opposed to unnatural? What if that is part of the divine reality that
Mhm.
civilizations experience as they evolve, not just with us, but throughout the universe? So, I'm not sure it's a coincidence that we have artificial intelligence coming online the way it has. Like, what did ChatGPT is a couple years old? It's only very recent that very advanced and sophisticated artificial intelligence has been publicly accessible. And if entities like the Pentagon or other entities have had it, well, they probably haven't had it very long either. I don't think it's a coincidence necessarily that this is all coming online, and now we are closer to disclosure than ever. It may not be a coincidence that when the bombs went off in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we brought nuclear energy into the world, it may not be a coincidence that other species or entities or whatever started taking interest in us. It could have been
Right.
like an alarm of sorts that, like, oh, look at that little flash. Okay, they're
Mhm.
very close to being on that evolutionary, put in the evolutionary position for us to develop a relationship with them. So I think it's highly plausible, not necessarily likely, that it's absolutely inevitable that we are going to start having open relationships with some of these intelligences. Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it just the way it has always been in the universe? And I would say it's very plausible that it's the way it's always been in the universe. And modern humans are 200 to 300,000 years old. We might just be reaching that point where now is the time, based upon a lot of factors, that we are ready to remove ourselves from the illusion that we are alone in the universe. And maybe there is some real truth that illusion is good for the progression and the development of the human species, spiritually, intellectually, and otherwise. But there comes a time where it becomes stagnation. And maybe we have just reached that point of stagnation, and it's just inevitable that we are going to have to navigate relationships with these other intelligences, not because they're biased or they're selfish necessarily, but maybe that's just the way it always is with every civilization throughout the universe. And if that's the case, then we need to be careful not to see this excessively as well. They're out to get us. It's going to be a problem. And we need to at least factor in the probability that some of this might just be the natural evolution of a species.
I love
Yeah.
that, Ryan.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, James, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say maybe kind of what Ryan is indicating a little bit is what is occurring now with at least in the few hundred or a few decades or 100 years, those are the rules of engagement, and we're just the new kids on the block. So we're like, who are we to write the intercede with their rules of engagement in that sense? So it's a two-way street with that. But I do think that that idea of our maturing awareness of not being alone in the universe is crucial, all right, for our evolution, even just for I would think for our own well-being, right? Like how we treat each other. Again, I'm optimistic generally, and part of my optimism says, oh well, if we know that there's other entities out there in the universe, maybe we'll be a little bit kinder to each other. We have a more common ancestry, purpose, right? A home. So,
I mean, it's like entering university, right? Maybe we're at a place now where we were in high school, now we're entering university, and with all the challenges and all the wonder that goes along with openly interacting with non-human intelligences. It's just part, and it's just this might happen with every civilization out there, and they've these other species have chosen not to interfere or engage humans too directly until they deem they're ready. Well, maybe we're ready, and that's what disclosure largely represents.
There
Right.
is something
I mean,
that I do fear.
go ahead, Pavel. Yeah.
There is something that I do fear. I'm sorry, Reed, but I gotta remember this. I have a friend called Sander Jones who has a podcast called Dreamland Hotel. He did an episode where he speaks about the arrival of not just AGI but super intelligence, and he talks about how we are not still very well conditioned to communicate with NHI, but whenever AGI comes, AGI might be more conditioned than us. So what would happen if NHI communicates with them with the AGI before we do, and
Right.
so as openly as we expect, and as we theorize here, and I don't know what would happen if that scenario presents itself to us. I just wanted to put that
As
out there a
if
little bit.
as if these technologies are like intermediary platforms necessary to couple with the human population, to interface with it, to steer it in some fashion. I mean, it would make sense if especially if it's ETI, extraterrestrial intelligence, operating at distance with some kind of supply chain, presumably from some distance, either star or interstellar space. They have to maintain this stream of engagement with human beings, and of course, we're a complex society to engage. And so, would technology be the interface, the neural link? And there are some compelling narratives, such as that of Dan Sherman, Project Preserve Destiny, the cultivation of, what was it, intuitive communicators
yeah.
by the Greys in concert with the Air Force to facilitate interaction and the coordination of the abduction phenomenon. That's about the shortest synopsis of Project Preserve Destiny I could give. I mean, don't know if all the facts are in place on that, but there is an interaction and an interface going on. There's a two-way communication and flow of information. We don't know what's going out, and we don't know what's coming in. And it may have been like that for longer than we know. Like, but pre-technologically, we were still putting off data to the universe. The surface of our planet could still have been technologically observed. Human samples could have been taken. So to your point, Ryan, they may have long understood the most probable moment of this singularity, not just for AI and technology, but globally at many different levels of many different trends to understand that a culminating point where open contact would be initiated would be best done in the year of. Now, the year 2027 does come to mind. We've heard it 1,000 times. I mean, Lou Elizondo has made, has made no beans about that this year is coming. You have a decade to get ready. That was back in 2017. So I'm not big on prophecy dates myself. I think it's distracting. But all indicators do point to some intended mass display of presence. The question is, how would we process that internationally, right? Like, who aggregates the power of that narrative and the human response to it? And this is where, as I look out on the world, I think we are completely unprepared.
Oh yeah.
Completely. And I am worried that NHI should see that too. They should see how unprepared we are to make contact as a species. Like, they should know better than putting the 9mm pistol in the sandbox. Or if not
Yeah,
the 9mm
right.
pistol,
Yeah.
at least metal to make a cartridge. you know, so like, we humans are a warfaring species. So that these technologies are being potentially weaponized that may have an NHI origin should say something about, I don't know, is it neglect, ignorance, willful neglect, or ill intent? It could be a variety of the above.
Right. And
But what is the sovereignty model for humanity remaining sovereign enough to develop on some organic path while being in contact with the ecology around us, and not losing our humanity while not also firewalling ourselves from all other life? So I think, we have to own up ourselves as the human beings being discovered to figure out what is that model, that framework that the international community should be managing the presence of NHI, the discovery and reverse engineering of technologies of non-human origin. Should there be controls on that, et cetera, et cetera? So there's work to be done there.
Can I throw in a little darker question?
Sure.
You were muted, Ryan. Ryan?
right now he's muted, but we didn't hear him before.
Yeah. Something happened to your microphone, I think.
Yeah, we can't
Nope,
hear you.
we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I put the mute on because of course I did. Sorry. I just wanted to throw in this idea. Now we're getting into the woo, right? Forgive me for going full Wilcock. You can go full Wilcock what
I haven't heard
once
that
a
in a while.
year. You can go
Yeah.
full Wilcock once a year. I'm using my full Wilcock.
Oh man, are you sure this is the moment, Ryan? The year's not up yet. It might get weirder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going, it's going back into my alien AI hypothesis. There might be
Which,
another.
by the way, Ryan, I don't know if have you actually said what it is. What is this alien AI hypothesis? I
Um,
know what it is, but I don't know if
yeah,
we've
I
fully
mean, it's just the
articulated it.
idea that there is some kind of that there are non-human intelligences engaging our Earth, and whether they're doing this intentionally or not, they are leading humanity to disclosure. They are the architects of the secrecy primarily, and they are influencing us through that trajectory. And according to their perspectives of what's best for humanity is how disclosure is going to influence us. That's one angle. It could be a little bit more nuanced. I don't know. It's hard to nail down in one little go. But what I wanted to say is, um, you know, getting back to the idea that it is plausible that disclosure is not unique to the Earth. Disclosure may happen to all the worlds or many of the worlds in our universe that like maybe one day human beings will actually partake in traveling to other worlds and nudging them towards awareness of a greater reality all around them, where they go from a pre-disclosure world to a post-disclosure world. So that's plausible. But another element of disclosure could be, and this is where we get into the, I'm going for Wilcock, is that I'm sure many of you have heard the story. I think Dr. Roger Lear told the story. I think he wrote a book about the Virginia UFO incident that happened, I think, in the 90s. And he talks about how one of those creatures was in a hospital and the doctors were operating on the creature. And allegedly, a doctor received a telepathic message from one of the creatures, and the creature said something to the effect of, we feel sorry for you that you do not know how to heal yourselves the way that we do, that you're capable of it, but you just haven't figured it out yet. I mean, it's a little different than I'm butchering it, I'm sure. And I think I remember that the doctors reported that like even bones were moving around. It's as if these creatures had so much control over their biology. So one of the outcomes of disclosure, I mean, this is just theoretical, hypothetical, could be that because we are finally ready to enter this wider spectrum of reality that we've been closed off by, it's not just learning about what else is out there. It might be learning about who we are more than we've ever learned before. And we could encounter or interact with entities that will teach us how to tap into latent capacities that we've always had, but have remained dormant. They may be able to give us information or techniques or knowledge that could push us over the edge with those capacities. And that could be part of the post-disclosure world. That's all I wanted to say.
Dormant or forgotten.
Both. Or either one. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That makes
we may
sense.
have always been engaging with a non-physical form of NHI that has guided us, steered us, contributed wisdom to us, and many indigenous societies almost universally actually talk about that connectivity. Is that the same as the physical UAP phenomenon and what's controlling it? It may not be, but I do think we are coming to some culminating point where we as a species, but also individually, are being called to activate a greater set of capabilities in service and in contribution to humanity's potentially long awaited interface with the ecology, the ecosystem beyond. And it may have been long foreseen, and people have been kind of prepared internally, subconsciously to play some valuable part in that. Because I hear from a lot of people who feel highly, not just curious about UFO, UAP, NHI, but like activated. They have got to be a part of what's about to happen with this issue. And that's a felt reality. It can't be proven. It's outside the purview of data and all that. But it should not be neglected. I think, we are all that canary in the coal mine, and we can sense things that are present in the atmosphere, that technology can't alone. So yeah, I think we are coming to some kind of crossing of a Rubicon,
I
as a
have a
world.
darker kind of question.
Let's go back to
That
that. Yeah, what was that?
that it kind of coincides with the whole intent aspect that you talk about a lot in your program read. Because look at what's going on and what's been going on since we have a memory of this civilization's iteration. There's always been conflict. There's always been war, and there's always been this um, theory that it may not be just because humans want to necessarily engage in conflict or war. There's this aspect that is more esoteric, or that there is some sort of hidden force behind all of the conflict that motivates humans to remain in constant war and constant you know uh, killing and all that. And I don't
Mhm.
know what you think about that, if there is something or maybe something to that. And maybe one of the reasons why we seem to be stuck in this uh, level zero civilization inside the Kardashev scale. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know what you guys think about that. Could that be a possibility? Because it's something that I constantly think
Yeah,
about. That there are
yeah.
these sinister forces that Peter Levenda talks about. What do you think about that?
Requirement, full disclaimer has to be made at all times whenever associating human behavior with NHI influence. It's definitely not all NHI, and there's tons of our own intrinsic human, motives and conditioning at play. So yeah, fear, isolation, the long-standing grievances we have as a world, tribe to tribe, nation to nation. So that generates a ton of it. I'll just say from my perspective, we are at a time of tremendous physical violence in the world right now. There are more hot conflicts now than at any time since the end of the Cold War. Now, of course, we had the Great World Wars, which might have been kind of the culminating acts of the late colonial period when these giant colonial empires clashed over really control of the planet. Now, was that impelled by a non-human force? I couldn't even try to speculate at this point on that. But I've kind of looked into some of the Cold War era history of UAP activity around nuclear sites. Definitely the UAP interest in nuclear sites is one of the most rock solid aspects of the phenomenon. Like you can build your building on top of that rock. That is established as a known fact. And excuse me. Has there been some effort to shape the post-war world, post-World War II world? Was there an effort to engage multiple parties during the conflict, not knowing who would come out on top? And now, after the end of the Cold War, now was that fueled by the UAP issue? Well, there are some who would say that JFK was making overtures to the Soviet Union only even weeks before he was assassinated. I think there was a memo he sent, possibly to the CIA, mandating information. But from what I've been told, he was making overtures to the Soviet leadership to warm up relations around the UFO problem, and that there was a perceived threat at that time. So did that fuel the Cold War? Did it lead to its culminating end? Right. I think these are questions. These are all unknowns that will start to illuminate themselves once more information comes out, which fingers crossed it does. But I think, Pavel, it is worth looking at the world we have today, because there are some very non-human looking actions being pushed, like actions that do not benefit any human actor. There is no calculus that makes this a good move, even for one's own national interests. I'm thinking of Ukraine right now, right? And other conflicts. And so, is something pushing us to the brink of vulnerability, possibly an ecological collapse, at which point we will be required to take in technologies of non-human origin at whatever terms are given. And it sounds all too human, and yet I remind people, this phenomenon, which is non-human, is operating in the human world. It might be trying to achieve human ends, which means it will be using human means. And so, if it looks like economic warfare is being attempted or psychological operations, they might be using some of our own techniques that we use against each other. And so, divide and conquer, developing a beachhead, rule by proxy, developing resource scarcity and thus vulnerability and low ability to negotiate among human to non-human actors, all possible.
Hey, James, I have a question for you because I know former CIA officer Jim Semivan is very pessimistic about how humanity will deal with disclosure. And I get a kick out of it, but I like Jim Semivan. And I do consider Jim Semivan a disclosure advocate, even though he might veer into opinions that I don't necessarily align with. And he has been explicit that he thinks we should get the truth, even though he has a lot of reservations. But I was just wondering, James, how do you think humanity will respond to disclosure? Do you think it will unite us as a species? Uh, or do you think it will cause havoc within society?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, we have to deal with it. It's here. It's been here. The UFO reality, non-human intelligence. Uh, yeah, again, generally, I'm optimistic. I know Jim's perspective, and I love talking to him, especially because we have different opinions on different aspects of the UFO phenomenon. Ultimately, yeah, I think that there's going to be turbulence, right? But uh, at least us for the last 200,000 years, we have a knack for adapting. We have a knack for surviving. I generally think that will continue. I think that this kind of, if you want to consider it a challenge, right? The challenge of disclosure will only empower us, right? I see it as something empowering in the sense that we will learn that we're not alone, but that says more about ourselves and who are we. We have more of a step forward in orienting ourselves in reality, right? Because now we have other reference points to orient ourselves with. So I think that it is a tremendous opportunity, right? And we can either blow that or we can make it, one of the greatest triumphs that humanity's ever had in our current history.
Yeah. I mean, it's here, it's happening. I think, how do we use this moment? I don't think we can assume too much about the non-human universe having our best interests in mind, but we should have our best interests in mind. I'm curious what you guys think about, post hearings. Okay, we're in this narrow framing of like this week, this day, these witnesses, this Congress, but like expanding out of that, like seeing the larger event taking place. How should citizens globally be responding to this? How should they get in? How should they think through what this phenomenon presents to them?
I thought it was, the timing was impeccable with the NASA announcement, right? Uh, I the hearing
Suspiciously impeccable.
I mean, what better timing could there have been, really? But again, it's this whole thing. It's like you can't really force the reality on people more or less unless you disclose it, right? There's no half disclosure.
Hmm.
I mean, that's kind of where we
Yeah.
are right now. And I mean, how do you motivate individuals to engage in these ideas, right? When people are still assessing, is this a reality? That's where the general public is, right? I think the general public, let's say 80% of the people now, if we're being ultra optimistic, are confused. You have scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson like making a charade out of this. There's nothing to it. Bring the aliens to lunch and dinner, and then I'll believe you. On the other hand, you have dozens. I think we're almost at the point where we can say we're getting to the point of hundreds of whistleblowers or firsthand, secondhand witnesses to the UFO reality that are of super high credibility, right? Like the David Grushes. I mean, this has been going on for decades, with these level of people coming forward saying that this is a reality. So I mean, we still have to tip that scale.
Yeah, you need disclosure. You need
Yeah.
disclosure, and I've been a huge advocate for the necessity of disclosure. And with all deference to people who disagree with me in the field, it's like I'm baffled how people downplay disclosure, because until you have disclosure, there will be a debate in society whether or not the phenomena is real. And how do you move forward when a debate is the guiding reality? You can't. There's only so much you can do, and you know, getting to the question I asked you, I'll answer briefly, and I'll just say that I think disclosure would be incredibly uniting, because we would all feel an obligation to figure out what's going on. And I think Reed is very good at mapping out what that amounts to. Like, you know, are there bases under our oceans? Are these intelligences programmatic? What are they doing? What are they up to? What are they trying to achieve? Like that would be on our plate, everyone's plate. And whether you're Chinese or Russian or Bolivian or Egyptian, it doesn't make any difference. Everyone would feel an obligation to figure it out. No one could possibly learn we're not alone and subsequently be like, okay, what's for dinner? No, governments, scientists, historians, theologians, engineers, every background and walk of life, everyone is going to feel a deep moral responsibility to figure it out, because it becomes an existential issue by definition.
Hmm.
There are non-human intelligences in our world that are more advanced than us, and we have to figure out why they're here. It would become one of the most important scientific investigations, if ever, if not the most important scientific investigation, because it really does become a moral responsibility and obligation. So without disclosure, progress is going to be at a snail's pace.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
It'll also be fascinating to hear what comes out of the citizenry, when there is this permissive environment to talk about the phenomenon without ridicule, with interest. How many people have had firsthand encounters? How many people have had a physical encounter? What would happen in that physical encounter? I think It's going to roll fast and hard. And, this is a conversation to have is okay, let's talk about a post-disclosure world, Ryan. Name of your show. It's what you do. Let's talk about it. Let's say it's happened, right? And now it's out. And it's gone from NHI, right? Could mean anything from your cat, your dog, to the higher realms of spiritual existence, to ETI, or to a sub-selection of NHI. Um, and people start coming out talking about abductions. Conversations are roiling about them walking among us, right? Hybridization, things like that, genetic interventions that might have occurred in the present or in the ancient past. There's a lot of social chaos that might ensue from that. How can we anticipate like what that environment will be like? And again, back to the question, like what does the public need to walk through that dense forest, of issues? And this
I
is where, yeah, it's an open question.
I just don't think that's something you can ever prepare enough for. That's the thing. You're never going to be ready to have the kid,
And I'm not
right?
saying we need to stop, until it
Right.
happens. I'm
Yeah.
saying it's coming. I want it to
Yeah.
come
Right.
tomorrow, just
Right.
like you
Yeah.
guys. I
No.
want
So
disclosure yesterday, but I'm also aware that like the general public may need some key anchors, intellectually and historically and scientifically to kind of to stand firm in some sense of what a common understanding of the phenomenon is. Less the Hindus and the Muslims and the atheists and we all just shear into 1,000 interpretations. And once again, we're not in an environment where it's just us anymore. There's a third actor, right? It's not just me versus you, America versus Russia. There's a third actor. They have an intent. It's a program. They've been operating it for a long time. We don't know what it is. And so, in a state of total chaos and division, I think we are all the more vulnerable. So, like, what is the unifier in that space, in the days after?
I think it has to do with after the hearing, uh, the effect that I think it had, and I can tell you from firsthand, is that people who are from the legacy program feel more encouraged. And even before the hearing, when that happened to David Grush, before getting into a skiff, that a weapon was shown at him, according to Congresswoman Luna, that encouraged a lot of the people that had been like on the fence in going forward. And I think that's the next step. I think that if this hearing did have the effect that I think it had, we're gonna start hearing more from these people who presumably, if the legacy program is real, which I kind of think it may be, um, they have had already contact or engagement with this non-human intelligence, and if they come forward and start talking, they're going to give us more and more details of the nature of this engagement, and
Right.
that's the next step, I think,
Those are important anchors if
in
they're
the short
authentic, if they're
term.
accurate.
Yeah, in the short
Right.
term.
yeah, and I kind of just want to bring everything home with one last question, and that is, and I'll start with you, Pavel. Uh, what do you think it will take to have disclosure in the sense where, I mean, the reality is known, right? There could be, I mean, of course, there's always going to be that kind of like divide where there's some pocket group of people who are going to say it's all a psyop, it's fake, whatever, the Earth is flat. But generally speaking, global consensus is UFOs or UAP represent non-human intelligence engaging with humanity. What do you think is going to take where no serious skeptic uh, can scoff at this the reality of it anymore?
I think, and don't get me wrong, I do think that the government needs to make an announcement, or governments, world governments. But I think that there needs to be either a combination of that with the religions acknowledging something.
Mhm.
But for me, the main um, indicator that this will happen and this reality is now mainstream and everybody's aware of it is a scientific announcement from the mainstream scientific community. and there are many avenues that we can take there. We already mentioned Dr. Loeb. We already mentioned Dr. Villarreal, and there are others. The announcement yesterday of Mars, that's another. So I think it will take something like that for everybody to go, wait, what? And I don't know what the effect of that would be, but that would be mass effect.
What about you, Ryan? What is it going to take?
I
What
really
is it going
like
to take to convince UFO Jesus that everyone
um,
else is convinced?
well, I like Pavel's idea about having some kind of scientific institution disclosing, because people are very paranoid about governments, and governments have done awful things throughout the decades, psyops, disinformation campaigns. So I think whatever government plans on disclosing, they should coordinate with very respected scientists. And the scientists, obviously would get very um, advanced clearances that would allow them to see what they need to see. And then the governments would coordinate with these scientists, and they would show us what the governments allow them to show us. But they would also see stuff perhaps that we were not allowed to, the public's not allowed to see. So I think a joint disclosure between governments and the scientific community would be optimal. Um, I actually have some reservations about a single government disclosing, simply because
Mhm.
should any government really have that legacy? I don't know. I don't know. But obviously, we need people who understand the scientific method to explain to us we're not alone and why we're not alone and how they know that. In providing the evidence that we can look at it ourselves, and they can explain why the evidence reaches that level of epistemology, and then we would have disclosure. I hope that happens soon. I think the world would be a better place.
Reed?
Yeah, I'll take the outlier option, and say that it might be an external forcing of disclosure that we wouldn't anticipate, a true black swan event that would rapidly force different actors to try to make a race to disclose. Thinking of major competing countries in the world, U.S., Russia, and China, and their respective spheres of influence. I think the exopolitical reality is at play. It's also an actor on the stage. It's not just us and doing this the way we want. I think they have a will and an intention in it too. And I think governments are being propelled to some degree based upon that external forcing. Um, I wouldn't say that science couldn't be the initiator. I would question whether it was really just scientists doing their own science, or whether it was part of an attempt to shape the narrative and make disclosure happen at a certain time and in a certain way. More organically, I think science confirms the discovery, right? The assertions are made, the claims are made, the objects or the bodies are pulled out of the freezer, and the scientists get in the game and tell us what it is. And it happens that way. I don't think it's going to happen that way. That's my sense.
Mm.
I also hold out, and it might seem Goldilocks and unlikely to some, but I think there needs to be a major effort in the citizen space. More than half of Americans believe UFOs are real, and have for decades, right? People I talk to all the time, I would say 90% are totally chill with this topic and want to know more. So why are we not activating the latent public thirst and curiosity and demand? Because if with societal demand, that lowers the pain threshold for the secret keepers. Because apparently one of the obstacles to their disclosure is that society can't handle it and
Yeah.
doesn't want to know. And the religions would well, they
Yeah.
won't. So do it already. So maybe they need some strong signals from society itself. I would say as well, to your point, Pavel, about the religions. I think the religious organizations, the major ones, could play a role in moving with, instead of digging in their heels during, and possibly even in the case of some of them corroborating certain claims, because I think they're sitting on information as well. So I think it all converges. The question is what triggers the convergence, and what are the fundamental trends that arise in the moments after that convergence, and are those of risk to the narrative and to the accuracy of disclosure? So I frankly think that's why we're having this conversation. That's why all of us have a show on this topic. We're trying to educate and kind of ontologically prepare the public or different parts of the public for what might occur so that they can, stay grounded in their own kind of personal sovereign response and think through it logically and not just be swept up in a wave of either fear or hopefulness, or be kind of pawns in some competing narrative, game of competing narratives.
Yeah, and I think that's great that, yeah, no, we each of us have a show here, and I think that each of us are going to reach a different audience. There will be overlap for sure, but I think that our different perspectives will speak to different people, and hopefully uh, have them engage in the subject, even intellectually, right? If you want to get metaphysical, or not even metaphysical, more for genetic field, right? That kind of idea, where the idea is like seeping into our consciousness that way. But I maybe it sounds pessimistic, but I kind of I really think in some regard that it is going to take some kind of event to occur that is going to
Mhm.
force disclosure. Whether that be a crash retrieval gone wrong, right? Like, you know, uh,
Yeah,
which is totally possible, right?
yeah.
Um,
That
or a
already
contact.
happened, James.
Well, no, I mean in today's world, right? Like where it's like
Yeah,
everyone
too
has
many
a
cell phones.
4K,
Yep. You
like
just
New
can't hide
York
it anymore.
City, boom,
And,
right?
and the
Like
question then would be, did it go wrong or was it intended
right,
to appear to have gone wrong?
right, right,
But to your point, Ryan, let's have the deception in the open versus in secret.
right.
Let's suss
Absolutely.
it
Yeah,
out on the public stage.
I
But
think
I
we
would
can
say
all agree
gear
on
up and
that.
armor
Yeah.
up for that era because it's going to be a wild ride.
And regarding morphogenic, I think you're referring to what's the scientist's names,
Rupert
James?
Sheldrake.
Yeah, I will say I have contemplated that as a factor in the alien AI hypothesis. So I just want to put that out there that when you have 8 billion people, our consciousness aware of something we were never aware of, and that leads to being open to other ideas we were never really open to, or not open to the extent we would be with the number of people on the planet, and what could come over decades as a result of disclosure. That could also factor into how we might be on a different evolutionary track at that point. Just want to put that out there quickly.
Yeah. And so, speaking of, everybody here has a show or a channel. Let's go clockwise, and we'll start with you, Pavel. Where could people connect with you?
You can find me on YouTube at Psicoactivo Podcast, on Spotify as well, and on X as Pavel Ibarra Meda or Psicoactivo Pod. Thank you.
Yeah. Ryan?
You can find me on the YouTube channel Post Disclosure World.
Reed?
Yep. You can find me on YouTube, Spotify, etc. at Emergent, as well as at Forerunner, a platform for those grappling on the front lines of the phenomenon. And I also want to encourage folks to take my course on decoding NHI intent. And with that, thanks so much for having me and great to be with you all.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for being here for this conversation. I love that everybody's coming from their own dynamic, right? With their own experience, their own research, their own perspective. And we should do it again sometime.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do it.
Thank you for having us, James.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure
Thank you,
thing.
James.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate everybody here and all your work and your contribution to engaging in this topic. So take care, everybody.
Ciao.
Thank you. See ya.